controlling.
Are they in another room controlling this?
Mr. Chairman, I don't see everybody on my screen except you and Mr. Brewer.
Yeah, that's because the camera must be pointing toward us. So sorry, everyone.
Hey, Mr. Brewer is having a drink already.
Yeah. It's filled with coffee, Doug.
Good morning, Mr. Brewer.
Morning.
Okay, we're set. Okay, thank you much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm August 24th meeting of the Finance and Personnel Committee to order. First I wanted to, well, I should say, first we have a quorum. We have everyone present on the committee. Mr. Seep is online. Let's go. I think I added something. I think I added a number 2 between 1 and 2. Proof of notification. So thanks to Tammy Wallace in the clerk's office, we were properly notified in time. Several of us, including myself, who should be the most responsible for this, forgot about notifying for this meeting. So they stepped in.
The paper.
They stepped in and did it on Friday. So I really appreciate that. We did I sent out an amended agenda to include the proof of notification and then the remote forms of access to the meeting yesterday, later in the day. So it was properly notified, but I should say only thanks to the clerk's office. Agenda item number 3, approve the agenda. So I'm looking for a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve, and after a second, may I ask for a roll call?
Okay, so we've got Mr. Cooey with the motion and Mr. Seep with the second, and then Clerk Kalish, would you mind taking the roll? Mr. Seep has requested that.
All right, Seep,
Here.
Murphy Lopez,
Here.
Gentis,
Here.
Luck,
Here.
Cooey,
Here.
Turk,
Here.
and Brewer. There you go.
Here.
Thank you. All 7 are present. You have quorum.
Okay, thank you, Clerk Kalish. So that takes us to agenda item number 4, 2022 proposed department budget. So I just wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping first with the committee. So I wanted to ask the committee's preference about questions and answers and interaction with all the department heads today. So would folks like to be able to ask questions throughout their presentations, or would you rather hear their presentation first and then do questions? Just curious what the committee would like.
I think for expediency, we should do questions afterwards because we might, unless other people.
Okay, so it sounds like most people are thinking presentations first, so I think maybe I give guidance to department heads to try to get through it within half of the time and then leave half the time for questions, if that's okay. Does that sound roughly okay? I mean, we can be flexible, of course, but we might want to give rough guidelines. And then as far as breaks go and keeping quorum, perhaps maybe if someone is, I know that this is a long day, so if someone needs to take a bathroom break, maybe you can go whenever you want, but just maybe make sure no one else is gone, so it doesn't get too, I don't know what the whole day is gonna look like, but I did look at the schedule, and as long as we keep on schedule, it looks like there are a couple opportune times for breaks, so we can also fit those in. But if anyone really needs a break, please speak up and say that. If you feel like we need a 5-minute break for the whole committee, just let me know.
Very generous of you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and Mr. Brewer says restrooms are right around the corner here, so for those people here. And then for anyone watching the video that this is recorded, there might be members of the public or county staff. You can go to the website. I don't think it's up right now, but there are meeting materials under August 24th attachments for this committee. And then for county board members, you can go to your iPad folders for this committee under folder 19, which is August 24th. And that's where you can find all the spreadsheets for each department's presentation. But then, and this is a little complicated, you have to go to folder 18, 20th. This is for county board members on your iPads, where there's another folder called preliminary budgets. And there you can find the summaries of of county budget as it stands right now, the preliminary budget. There's 3 different documents there, and then there are also, each department has written up a narrative, and you can find each department under that folder. So if anyone gets lost, just let us know. And then lastly, I just want to say that this process, we're always trying to improve it. We're learning and hopefully improving all the time. If anyone has any ideas for how to do that, just contact any member of the Finance and Personnel Committee or Administrator Clint Langreck. And we'd love to hear those ideas. So with that, that takes us to our first presentation today, and that's Tracy Dorsen from the Health and Human Services Department. So Tracy, if you can attempt to keep it to about 12 minutes or so, that would be roughly half the time we have left.
I do want to introduce the committee to Stephanie Ronfeld. Stephanie's our new Business and Financial Services Manager, and I asked her to join me today. Embarrassed getting her feet wet, so we started building the Health and Human Services goals in mind. One was services that were existing, and as part of that also to meet all of our staffing levels. The second was to implement a new drug court. Third was to try to expand the availability of psychiatric services in the community. And fourth was to try to sufficiently fund.
Come up closer, you can't hear her at all.
Linda, can we maybe?
Oh, you want me to move?
Do you mind if we switch?
Whoever's
maybe
the
that-
hot seat, I don't mind, because we
I
can't hear
appreciate
you
it.
at all.
Thanks for letting
No
us know.
problem. I'm like, I put a chat up, but Jason didn't have it up here, so nobody can see it.
Thank you.
I'm just going over
Now I
there.
see it, now that you said that.
I'm going over there. I just can't carry everything.
Let me help you grab some stuff.
I got, I'll come back.
Stephanie, do you want to move up? Get you guys up here closer to the hall. How you doing? No, that's.
Okay, we're gonna do a take 2. If you don't mind repeating, that would be great. Thanks.
So essentially, Health and Human Services attempted to achieve 4 different goals in our budget. The first was to retain our existing services and.
Mr. Chairman, may I
Yes.
ask for, that the speaker speak up a little louder?
We're gonna move the speaker a little closer.
Thank you.
Or that.
I have my hearing aid in.
Right,
Oh.
how is that, Don?
Oh, that's beautiful.
Great. So again, Health and Human Services, we built the budget attempting to put, I guess, prioritize 4 goals. First was to maintain our existing services, and with that, retaining our staffing levels. Second was to implement a new drug court. Third was to expand the availability of psychiatric services in the community. And fourth was to sufficiently fund the placement funds based on existing historical expenses. So in keeping within the guidelines that were given to try to incorporate the wage increases, 7% health increase, and stay within our tax levy, we were not able to achieve all of those things. We did manage to make it work for maintaining our current service and staffing levels. So within our tax levy and really aggressively looking at our revenues, claiming of various funding sources, maximizing every source that we can, we were able to achieve goal number 1. The remaining goals are not possible within the existing tax levy. What I and the Health and Human Services Board would recommend is, well, ask is to find funding for the drug court. You may know that we currently have a sobriety court in Richland County. The sobriety court focuses on OWI offenses. We do not have a drug court, which is a very different animal. Richland County, like every other county in the nation, is experiencing a drug crisis. There is a grant that funds the existing OWI court, and that grant is available. It is available in 5-year cycles, and this is the year that we could apply for more funding to help fund the drug court. There's a 25% match requirement for this grant. This is the Treatment Alternatives and Diversion Program. It's also called TAD, and that's what we currently use to fund the sobriety court. We would like to submit a proposal to apply for enough funds that we could implement the drug court, and to restore that back into the budget. It would require $15,000 in tax levy. That would be the match requirement for us to attain. We currently use other staff expenses to match against the funding that we receive for the sobriety court. And so we've kind of maxed out what we can claim as non-cash match, I guess, so to speak. The remaining goals that we have, it would cost $60,000 to expand the psychiatric services by about 4 hours a week. And the final goal is to sufficiently fund the placement funds, which would be roughly about $490,000 additional tax levy dollars to reach $1.5 million in the placement funds. This year we are projecting to end just a little bit under that, and I think that would be a responsible number to try to fund those placement funds to address the expenses. Director Langrick did instruct us to put that into the budget, so I know that that is included in the numbers that you have. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes,
Yeah.
$490,381 are additional expenditures we're tracking right now.
So I guess that's my presentation. I don't know if anybody has any questions or would like me to clarify anything further.
Mr. Chairman, I could not hear Mr. Director Langrick.
The answer is yes, Don. We have it incorporated into the budget.
Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, any questions? Discussion from the committee?
I have a question. How successful have we been diverting those placement fund dollars into reimbursable expense?
One of the biggest things that we've tried to do is capture Medicaid funding for some of those community residential placements. CCS funding, when individuals are enrolled in that program, can fund nearly 100% of those costs. So now who's in a community residential placement, which, oh gosh, probably is maybe a third of the overall placement costs, are enrolled in that program. That's a voluntary program, so people have to agree to be enrolled, but the majority of individuals need that level of service, and there's more services that can be provided to them when they're in that. We aren't quite where we want to be yet. We do have a very high placement cost that is a residential placement cost, and the way that the funding works for Medicaid for this program is that we bill a Medicaid rate for the service, and then when we come back around to the next year, we do a reconciliation. And so when we have a really high cost, that Medicaid rate does not cover the entire service. And in that reconciliation, we should recoup the actual expense of that. So this will be the first year where we will be doing that reconciliation and seeing that we're recouping that high cost. So we think that's going to happen, but until we have this experience for this first year, we just don't have the same level of confidence for that. So I feel like we're moving in that direction. The other thing we're doing is trying to utilize crisis stabilization, which is allowing the person to go to a facility other than a hospital when it's appropriate for their care needs. And we are able to bill Medicaid for that service, unlike when someone is in the institution, Winnebago, we are not able to retain Medicaid funding unless they're under the age of 21 or over the age of 64.
So one question I have is, so I'm looking at the budget summary document that this is called the budget summary Richland County. It's the one that gets published in the paper. It's like a 13-page document. And on the third page, there's a health and social services section, and then it shows health and human services. And there's three main lines, I think, that HHS is pulling from for expenses. And the first line is row 74. It says health and human services. And it's increasing from last year's budget of roughly 6 million to this year's budget. And these are expenses of 7.3 million. That's a 1.3 million increase. And then under institutional adult costs, it also goes up from 482 grand to 800 grand. And then institutional children's from 527 to 700. So I know that you all are pulling in revenues from other places, and that wouldn't all go on the property tax levy, but what proportion of it under this current budget that you all are presenting will come off the levy? Is there anywhere we can go to see what those numbers are?
So I don't know if this answers your question, but in the summary report that I presented on the page, it does show you the amount of revenues and the amount of tax levy that we are kind of dividing that up by as we built the budget. Is that what you are asking?
I think so. So it's on that document on the first page, there's that tax levy column. It adds up to a total of 822 grand.
That's correct.
And so that's your department's budget, what would come off of the levy?
That is, except for the placement funds.
And so,
Those have always been kept separate.
okay, and what was the figure last year? for
In
tax
that,
levy?
in that same, well, that was the same amount, 822,156.
Got it. So your request for tax levy dollars for your department, not counting institutional cost, is flat. It's staying the same.
Yes, other than the request for the 15,000 for drug court.
Got it. And then for the institutional costs, those two changes I just read, is that all from the levy institutional costs, or does
Yes.
anything come from other?
No,
Okay.
just kind of the way that we do it, there are some reimbursements, but the bottom line amount is always levy. So the reimbursements that we do get applied to that and reduce the amount that's applied to levy, but we don't generally budget it that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
That answers my question. And is the $15,000 additional for drug court, I might have missed this, is that in the
No,
0%? So that'd be an
that
add-on
would be an add-on.
to the 822. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just to confirm that too,
Yep.
on the summary sheet. we
Make sure
have-
to speak up so Don can hear you.
For the expanded psychiatric care, that is a project you recommended at this point to defer until 2023.
That is, I just recognize that the priority right now, it would be drug court because this is our opportunity to apply for those additional funds.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right, if not, then we can move on to our next presentation. Who's the next department head? Let's clerk it. Okay, thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Dorsen, appreciate it.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you.
Okay, so next we've got Clerk Derek Kalish, and he's gonna present on the county clerk's budget. And we're gonna move the speaker closer to him for those who are listening online.
All right, Don, can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you, Derek. Very kind of you to ask.
All right, so you all have my budget summary. I'm not going to go through this line by line, but I sincerely hope that items number 1, 2, 3 are you have a general overview of what the clerk's office does. So I won't eat up my 15 minutes explaining to you all what we do in that office. You have the summary so you can see that. Let's jump to item, which is explaining the department's major goals with this 2022 budget. So there were 4 or 5 major goals identified in 2022 that I would like to accomplish with the budget. The first goal is the codification and digitization of all county ordinances and resolutions. So this conversation has already kind of started at the finance and personnel and rules and resolutions level. So we've kind of heard this, but what this goal does in the 2022 budget is assembles a complete listing, which would be a legally reviewed, updated, electronic and easily accessible, searchable, and user-friendly code of ordinances. Currently, right now, the code of ordinances in the county is a collection of portfolio books, 11 by 17 size, and is incredibly difficult to find those. And those are the ordinances that the county uses to govern itself. So part of my budget does include that major project being done. This has never been done before, and this will be a huge accomplishment for Richland County. Item number 2 would be to update general records retention schedule, purge any obsolete documents, and complete that office relocation. So you've all been in the county clerk's office. I think you're all well aware of the amount of paper we have in there. So updating our retention schedule to allow us to maintain required documents, get rid of those we no longer need, and free up that space for us to increase office operations, the efficiency, and just overall space and stuff we're storing would be quite helpful. Again, this would be a process that would be making up for decades of this not being done. So number 1 and number 2, the codification and going through our records retention schedule and getting rid of stuff would be a nice task to be accomplished with this budget. Item number 3, this is as I looked at how I can make my budget work with the resources I have, transitioning WISP vote election duties from the county to the local municipalities. I don't want to go into a ton of detail with this, but again, as I was trying to figure out how I can do what I need to do with less resources following the budget directive set forth, there is a possibility that the county could unload some of the election duties that I do as a county clerk to the local municipality. So currently, right now, the county clerk's office does perform all election entry data into WISP vote. This is not a statutory requirement and a service that the county does perform for villages and townships at no cost to them. So again, my mind always goes from mandated to non-mandated services as we figure out how we can use what we have available. This would be a service that could free up some time for us to allocate resources for myself and my staff to do other things that we need to do. Item number 4 would be to train my new deputy county clerk. I can't express to you enough how important it is for the county clerk to set time aside to train their deputy. This person is expected to fill the gaps when I'm not available, so I do need the time to have a deputy that I feel completely comfortable with if I am not in the office. So that is a huge thing. That's really, there's not a huge price tag attached to that, but it does take time and resources. Item number 5 is to continue the efforts to streamline office operations. So efforts toward this process have already been made. We noticed those at the last county board meeting where we're trying to do more things electronically than using papers. We're no longer using a typewriter on a regular basis. Department heads are now required to submit voucher cover sheets, which clearly state their funding to pay their bills. Historically, the accounts payable person would be handed a stack of bills and be expected to code them all and pay them all without departments providing, I shouldn't say all departments, without the proper direction from departments. So that frees up my staff time to do that. And also, I do believe increases the level of accountability for departments and their budgets and knowing what's coming out of what line. There are other documents that we've started to migrate from paper to electronic. So those are the 5 big goals that I have for 2022. They're quite lofty and will take time. I will admit that. based, on the budget guidance set out to us for this budget. I think many of you also know the county clerks our office has minimal revenues. You know, we're not necessarily a revenue generating, office. That's not how we function in nature. With approximately 80 marriage licenses a year, that equates to about $400 in revenue. So that doesn't, give me a ton of money to work from. Other miscellaneous, revenues, copies of sales, plat books are quite infrequent now and not large enough to make a difference in the overall budget because again, much of those documents can be attained or retained electronically. So really, to meet the 2022 budget guidance set forth with no increase in levy, the only way that I could really do that would be to cut staff in a few operations in which I have the ability to absorb that. So I'm sticking to my the budget guidance. You may have noticed that I have a 0% levy increase, which is that was the directive moving forward. I will say before I tell you how this impacts my budget, all those lists of the 5 goals that I had, they may be possible. They will be incredibly difficult for just myself to do and any reduced staff to do. Reducing staff also in my office, my deputy also does accounts payable. So any reduction in those staff hours hits 2 major essential functions of, well, the county clerk's office and local government. So number 6 kind of reduces for this document here, tells you what happens with the budget guidance or how it affects my budget to meet the guidance. So in order to meet that guidance, I had to reduce the deputy county clerk's office or her position to 30 hours per week. Not crazy about that, but this is like I said, one of the things I would have to do to meet that budget guidance. A side note, the county clerk will not be taking any health insurance, so we have a little bit of savings there with me not taking any health insurance. My office supply budget would be reduced to about $21 a month. Basic advertising will be reduced $600. My fear with that being reduced is should we reduce staff time? It's likely, or it could be possible that my staff may want a 40-hour-a-week job. She just transferred from a 40-hour-a-week job to come over here to the county clerk's office. So there are no funds budgeted for me for conference registration, mileage, or hotel stays. While I have no qualms paying for them myself, I don't feel that is really an accurate representation of the expenditures required to run the county clerk's office. And although they are conferences, they are quite beneficial to speak with my counterparts in the state. There's 72 county clerks in the state. So when I can get together with even 3 or 4 of them, it is quite beneficial to have that time with them as we talk about different ways that we all do things differently and we can learn from each other. Ways that we've tried to adjust to the budget, for budget adjustments to meet guidance. Clinton, the county administrator, and I have explored the option of shared printer, so we're saving costs with toner and all that stuff. And then also the other thought that I had was in my budget, there's a $10,000 line item in there, or 10,000, a little over that, for the cost of the digitization and codification. I think that because the county clerk's office wouldn't be the only department to utilize that perhaps there could be some cost savings in splitting that cost out to a few other departments. So those are the big things that would, those are the big ways in which the budget guidance have impacted my 2022 budget. Again, all those goals would likely be possible, but it will be incredibly difficult to do that. I don't like to say that I can't do anything because I like to say I can do everything, but it would just require a lot of work. If you all have my budget summary sheet, I think you all had access to that, but that's in essence essentially what I just went over with you. So you can see the deficit for my 2022 request is at $14,000, which is what I would request, or the cost to restore the county clerk's office to function at the level in which it does right now with these goals. The cost to do that would be around that $14,000. So 11,000 of that would be staff, but is also that expense line is from that codification and digitization project, which we all know that we need to do that. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Let's just make sure that the clerk is finished first.
okay, so, and then just moving through the rest of this budget summary document, I don't have any anticipated capital projects. I think the 5 things that I have outlined are huge tasks and are the most important tasks and the things that we really need to focus on. So, the future operational changes would be the continuation of the digitization of all the ordinances, resolutions, and county board minutes. So that can be in the next budget season. But if we get started with this, we're well on our way for next year to be in a position where the county's digitized and things are much more accessible.
Okay, thank you. So, one thing before we go to Mr. Seep, I just wanted to say, so when I went to your folder under today's meeting for August 24th, I just want you to know what we're seeing, because I think this might make what you were trying to tell us a little more challenging when you said you all have my spreadsheet. So we have about 60 sections in that folder, so we're gonna need a little bit more direction about what to look at.
So the sheet that I was referring to is just my budget sheet that has my line items on there and the cost that I allocated to each line item.
You know what that's called?
Yeah, it's called 10.5141.
Okay. Do that again, just a little slower.
10.5141.
Transferring air.
10.5141.
Wow, mine says file transferring air.
We're all trying to get at it at the same time.
I did it last week, though, and it
This is what you guys are talking about.
There it's not.
So I should apologize. You can see I have lots of budget worksheets to do. So just to give you an idea of how complicated these things can be, all those worksheets have to be completed. So
can you tell us what all those other just give a summary of what all those other worksheets are, so we know what your
right.
role in the budget is?
So what I did last year when I created this, when I was here, is I took every expense line and every revenue line the county has in its chart of accounts, which is the line items we use to clarify expenses. I divvied those out to each department, put them with the applicable department. So all those folders you're seeing are the budget, the revenue, or the expenditure lines that each department is responsible for in terms of determining what the budget is and knowing that. So each folder, all those things are all the budget worksheets that are, farmed out to departments. So that's what you're seeing in all those things. So all of those collectively are put together to make your budget summary, the summary worksheet we use for the budget. So that's what those all are. And all those have to be calculated and put together.
So I noticed, like, when I was going through the summary earlier, that there's a line called state shared revenue.
Yes.
There's a lot of state shared revenue lines, but there's one I think the big one, like the 1.2 million. So are you responsible for coming up with the new figure for this year for what the state shared revenue? Is that an example of something that would be in this folder that would have its own spreadsheet?
Right.
Okay.
So some of the bigger ones have their own line, and then there are some revenues that are kind of clumped together. It just kind of depends on the nature of the revenue or expense and how it works together. But some of those lines, like state shared revenue and all those final numbers will come from the state, but they just won't come until later on in the year, like October or November. So these are preliminary numbers based on, averages and kind of where we see the numbers trending. So for the purpose of this August one, I just got some updated figures today in my email. So these are estimates that will be finalized from the state later on.
Okay, thank you.
None of us can open that file that you just sent though, this file transfer error. The 10.1141.
Okay.
It's opening for me.
You, yeah, it's not opening for
No,
us
not
three.
right.
So I can pass this around if you all want to look at it.
That'd be great.
It's got my notes on it, but feel free. I don't care. You can see it.
I mean, at some point, can we make sure that file opens so we can look at it?
Yeah, in the meantime, we're gonna need to figure that out, so we'll write that down on our to-do list. And then I noticed that some of them have names next to them, like there's 10.5158 auditing fees. That,
Those were just to keep it straight as we were going through a million sheets.
and that's
So
great. That'll help us, because otherwise this is all.
It's all Greek to you.
It's all Greek.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that'd be great. Okay, Mr. C, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I couldn't quite hear Melissa, but just a reminder for future statements from Melissa. I want to thank Derek for a very, very clear statement of his and understandable statement of his goals. I have two minor questions. One is, I think you alluded to, uh, a change in, posting the election results. Is that right?
No, I would still retain the statutory duties of the chief election officer for the county. It is just the data entry, that we typically do for the townships now. So there
Yes.
would be statutory guidelines, Don. I would do everything the county clerk's supposed to do. The townships could be responsible to enter their own election information, which is not something the county clerk has to do. In my conversations with other counties, county clerks are actually not doing this because they're having the same struggles we are. They only have so many hours in a day, and with lack of resources, it is a luxury to do that for,
Yes, I understand that.
Not-
And I assume that most townships have their own website.
I don't know, actually, a lot of them do not, Don, and a lot of them, this will be an epic change if we have to do this. And the only reason I explored that option was because if I'm going to have any reduction in staff, I have to unload services that we offer. And again, this is a non-mandated service that we offer. I'm not saying it's the best solution, guys, but if we're looking, if I'm gonna have less people, then I have to do, I gotta reallocate stuff, so this.
I understand that, and I know that a lot of people really appreciate that service, but you're in charge of your budget. The second question I had to do with submitting, no longer submitting a stack of bills, and I didn't quite catch the alternative to that.
The alternative's already in place. What would historically happen is, not all department heads, but some departments would just drop bills off on the counter or give, the accounts payable person a stack of bills. The bills would not be coded to whatever department they're supposed to be expensed out of, and there would be really no indication. So, Tammy and then previously Amy would have to try to go through the department's budget, best determine which budget line they wanted to pay it out of, and then pay the bill using a typewriter. So we've now made the form an electronic form, which they can either send electronically, or they fill out that form and bring it in with all their bills that has all of the funding. This way, my accounts payable specialist can literally enter the funding as stated by the department. So there's no longer any mystery as to what expense line bills are paid out of. And then it can be reviewed by Josh if necessary and things like that. So we're just moving from, a paper to an electronic version and putting the accountability on the department heads to manage their budget, not the county clerk's office.
Yeah, I see it. And of course, the bills and the documents would still be on file in your office.
That's correct, sir. It's the
Right.
same thing we did before. It's just electronic, and departments are now responsible to tell us which line they pay their bills out of, so we're not guessing.
Very good, and congratulations, a good job.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep, Mr. Brewer?
Derek, I probably missed this, but what is the actual savings if we ask the town clerks to enter their own election day results?
I believe around $3,500. So
That is gonna be a very unpopular.
it will be very unpopular, and I can't say that I'm really a fan of that. I like to help the town clerks. I really do. I was one of them for a very long time, so I get it. And they're strapped with access to internet and stuff like that just as well. They have resources too they have to manage. So I'm not a fan of that. And I only threw that out there to meet, budget guidance. This is how I could do that if I had to. So I'm not a fan of it. I'll just go on record and say
Very
that.
good.
I do respect the work that the town clerks do. And this would be a huge undertaking for lots of them. But if we have to go that way, I guess we have to go that way.
It's just a comment, we made the national news.
That's
at
correct.
the last election because our town clerk was ill or something
correct.
happened.
That's right.
Especially with the allegations of vote fraud, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think it's a good idea, but
I'm not a fan either, Mark.
only one vote.
Okay, anyone else? One additional question I have, so under number 7 on your summary.
Mhm.
It says here that the cost to restore the cuts is 14.5 grand, 11 grand of that deficit is due to the ordinance codification and digitization
Yeah.
project. So am I assuming correctly that all the things happening in number 6, all these cuts, could some of these be restored if that ordinance codification project did not happen? Or
Yes.
another way to say it is the ordinance codification in your 0% levy change, is
It
that
is.
incorporated in there?
Yes.
So you prioritize, in this current preliminary budget,
Yes.
the codification project has been prioritized over some of these other things.
Yeah.
Okay,
The codification, it's $11,025 in my budget line, is in my budget, my core budget is the county clerk. But like I said, those things I went through with the reduction and all the other account changes, I would have to make those, to make this all work as well. So that codification takes up a large part of my core budget, which leads into the other things I discussed. So it's in there. It's in there.
okay, yeah, I think several of the members of the Rules and Resolutions Committee, not all of them, but are here, so it's
Yeah.
good for us to be hearing that if that's a priority, it does come at the cost of some other things, so we need to weigh those two things.
Mr. Chair, you said some of this cost you think could be spread to other departments. You have an idea how that might break out?
Oh, there's a bunch of different ways we could do it, but I guess Clint and I could talk about how we divvy out those costs at a later time. I won't take time now, but the thought behind that is that I'm fine, if it's absorbed in my budget, fine, but I think that there's other departments that are gonna utilize this too, that could help pay for the service.
Whole county. will
Correct,
utilize it.
right. So we could divvy that out. It wouldn't be that complicated to do, so.
Okay, we got 2 more questions and then we'll move on to ambulance, so Supervisor Luck, go ahead.
My thought is that perhaps the codification should be pulled out of the budget as a separate project for the whole county and not on.
Melissa, I can't hear you.
My thought is that we should pull that project, the codification project, out of any particular department budget and consider it as a separate project for the county as a whole.
Okay, Supervisor Turk?
And related to that, if we were able to section that off as a project that's happening on a special, like a one-time thing,
Yeah.
is there one-time revenue that might be able to offset that, like ARP or something?
Okay, so thank you, Clerk Kalish, for taking the time to be with us today and go over that. I think we've got a little good discussion here, and now we need to move on to our next one. And that is ambulance services, emergency management.
He's
So,
online.
do we have Darren Gudgeon online?
Yes, hello, can you hear me okay?
Mr. Gudgeon, go ahead and I'm not sure if you were here earlier, but we're just doing a presentation first from department heads. And so you have 15 minutes allotted, so with about half of that time, if you could do the presentation, and then